What's up? It's BD. Today I'm just going to be doing the July 2022 Getting Bigger Q&A. So, before I get into it, if you like what I do, subscribe to the channel. If you like this video in particular, like it. Pretty obvious. Have your own questions, comment them down below. Or better yet, on the subreddit r/gettingbigger. I would post a link, but it's against YouTube guidelines for whatever reason. That being said, I have two other things. One, peak male physique for male enhancement aids. They are not needed, but they can help. And B, I have a Patreon if you'd like to support the cause. So let's get into it. We'll start with the YouTube comments first. Or questions first. I didn't wait as long, by the way, for gathering questions, so there's not that many today. Which is probably a good thing because these things can go for an hour if I'm not paying attention. So, Foxface says, to what extent are pumping girth gains permanent? How long would they last if you stopped pumping? Normally, when you stop girth training in general, you'll lose about 1/8 of an inch depending on how well you keep this erection quality. If you're a healthy dude, you can expect to keep the vast majority of your gains. If you are a couch potato and never go to the gym, expect to lose erection quality quite quickly after the fact just because you're not working your blood holding tissue. Therefore, it's going to go back to baseline of being out of shape. Now, there are some caveats. Let's say you have let's say you have a chronic swell response, so this swelling never goes away until the next session. Some guys will have chronic inflammation for upwards of a month, and then they'll say, yo, I lost half an inch of gains, but really it was just a bunch of fluid buildup. So you gotta keep an eye on that. It's pretty rare to be that swell receptive, but it does happen. But yes, most of your gains will stick with you, either length or girth. For length, you can expect about 1/4 of an inch of ligament retraction. Any shaft elongation will stay roughly the same, barring EQ changes. Bob Bobby asks, how effective will water pumping be without manual stretches? Without the stretches, I would not expect to gain much length, because that's what's actually causing this tissue to build outward, not outwards, elongated, instead of bursting out of the seams like a balloon, so to speak. You can expect probably about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch this way, depending on your erection quality, but after that is going to be a very slow going length response, just because you're not stressing the tissues in a way that it's more collagen targeting. So collagen is what builds up the tunica albuginea. That is the connective structure that controls the stiffness of the penis. It gives the blood holding chambers something stiff to press against to make your penis appear hard, or hard in general. Collagen has a different adaptation response to stretching than, say, blood holding tissue, so it's going to have a better effect stretching it. So if you can't stretch and you're trying to go for length, you're really working against yourself. You can make length gains with a pump though. Water pumping, I'm assuming you mean back mate, is going to be much harder to do, but if you get a slim cylinder air pump, it's going to stretch the tissues and cause some angiogenic activity at the same time. I personally don't like length pumping, it's uncomfortable, but it does work for length targeting. So, and then huge ass, good one, asks how to gain erections for PE without the use of porn when a person has been reliant on porn. So there are a few ways you can go about this. One, you kick your porn addiction first. That would take probably about a month if it's just like a mental dependence and you can work past it. You can also wean yourself off of it using erotic audio or erotic writing. And then finally, you have a partner help you get there. But if all else fails with a penis pump, you can pulse up to pressure, or pulse up to your max erection size, release, and then quickly over engorge, basically, once you hit 5 Hg at max size, and then you keep topping off pressure. Now you will get more of an edema response this way, since that tissue is not in a engorgeable or an easily engorged state, since you're technically flaccid yet with the hormone response. But it will give you gains. And then eventually you'll get used to it, build up a better erection response as you go into it. So it will get easier over time. On to Reddit. So Hot Mathematician 170 asked, I've been pumping once a day since February. My sessions are 3 sets of 15 minutes with 10 minutes of rest. I started doubling my sessions, so now I am pumping every 12 hours. If I don't pump for 36 hours, I lose all my gains. What do I do to cement my gains? Okay, so you've been doing it for 4 months. You are at 45 minutes total with 10 minutes rest. First, you don't need that much rest. You only really need 2 to 5 minutes to basically get fresh blood supply into that tissue. I don't think you should be doubling your sessions. If anything, you should cut back your sessions a little bit, because you're going to be hitting the point where you're overworking the tissue. Edema is not gains, okay? And from this thread, it seems like you understand that. But you should not be really tracking your gains when you are engorged at any state, unless you're tracking with a cock ring, and that's a little different. But what I would do is actually get a cock ring, track to see if you're making any gains that way, and then if that's the case, you have an erection quality issue. And then let's see, I'm not sure if you're doing any tunic availability, but if you're going for girth, I recommend you add that in at the beginning for a month, and then cut that back once you are primed. Still thinking. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is pump for an hour and a half a day, because to me that sounds like a waste of time. If you're into that kind of bloat, go for it, but I don't think that's going to be conducive for gains. So Bernie's lawn chair asked, I'm a big guy with a powerlifter body. I would say same here. I've got muscle, but I'm square and have a decent fat pad. I'm going to diet around to 12% down from 20%-ish. Does diet type matter for PE? Like, will fasting, keto, low carb, if it fits your macros, etc. matter for PE progress, or will it all be the same? And I just pick what's best for me for fat loss. And then you have another question. So let's talk about diet. As long as your calories are within, let's say above, hold on, I can word this better. So let's say your calories stay out of the starvation range, which would be a 30% deficit off the top of my head, you will still gain no issues with PE. However, I've noticed that when I cut my carbs significantly, I have issues reaching max size when I am not about to have sex. So keep that in mind. As for picking your diet, I would suggest consider how your ancestors ate. If they were coastal people, they probably ate more fish and got a lot more energy from fatty foods, say coconuts. Fish is, just high in fat in general. And then if they're more inland people, they're going to be more carb dominant. So personally, I would die on a keto diet just because my Irish ancestors literally lived off potatoes for 500 years. And then beyond that with everything else. So that's just food for thought. And then you want to keep an eye on your salt intake, because that can increase swell response, and then you can get slightly better pump with more salt with your muscles and with your penis. So yeah, figure out what diet works best for your body. Keep your deficit not extreme and you'll be fine. You will see EQ fluctuations day to day though. Second question. I do compression, hanging, and pumping. Is there any benefit of mixing up the stimulus by doing different stuff? Like if I clamp or use an extender every now and then? Or is the 1-3 protocol fine? So, when it comes to length work, it really doesn't matter what you use to make this tension, as by the end of the day, tension is tension. However, hanging is better for targeting the ligaments, especially compression hanging, because you can get closer to that ligament. compared to extenders, which is going to put most of the strain on the shaft, leading to shaft elongation. But you really don't need to switch it up all that much because, again, tension is tension. Now, with pumping and clamping, it's different. At first, it's internal pressure with clamping. So it's your own body working to fill this tissue with a little bit of help from a stent. So this causes it to burst out more instead of being pulled out, if that makes sense. On top of that, clamping is going to have a much stronger hypoxic effect compared to pumping. But that can be dangerous for one. And two, you're not going to get the same expansion as you would with a pump. So if your goal is girth right now, you want to mix in both, in my opinion. Eventually, if you're a newbie, just stick with pumping for the first 6 to 8 months. Or better yet, with your hands for 2 to 3, move the pumping for another 4 to 6, and then go clamp. And then mix in both once you hit a year, year and a half. For length, like you're working on, just stick to pumping. It's really not going to make that much of a difference. Yeah, you don't need to overcomplicate it. So Vanilla Rains hypothesizes, since deadlifts and squats are the two exercises that make your whole body grow as an organism, should I/we be doing these two exercises, or the ones which give off the most stimulus to release androgen responses so it accelerates PE gains? Okay, I don't think the exercise selections you do in the gym are going to help PE that much, except for some flexibility stuff to keep the pelvic floor loose, and same with your hips. Obviously, you want to do your cardio. As for deadlifts and squats, any increase in testosterone, DHT, growth factor, like IGF, is not going to be very noticeable, if at all, because we're still talking about natural levels here. The best you can expect to see is between like 1 to 10% more, and if we're talking 1/8 of an inch, what's 1/10 of 1/8 of an inch? It's not going to be imperceptible on a ruler. So I would not be overthinking it as much as you are, but it's an interesting theory. And if you are looking into increasing the growth response, I strongly suggest looking into increasing the healing response instead, as that's going to have less fuckery with your hormonal, pituitary, adrenal axis. So like your testes and all that. And it's, like I said, much safer. So, and probably easier to get stuff for it. Okay, let's see. Signal Trade asks, is there such thing as non-responders to girth? Like, are some people doomed for girth gains no matter the consistency and technique? I would say there is no such thing as non-responders, but there's certainly weak responders. But I think you can still make gains as long as you are optimized. It may not be fast as an average dude, obviously, but you can still make decent gains as long as you're consistent. The most important thing when it comes to people not making girth gains is not having the tunica able to expand outwards. So if they can't expand outwards, all they're doing is going to be stretching the skin with edema. Therefore, when are they actually working this tissue? That's why I make sure tunica malleability is paramount in all my girth routines, since it is like the limiting factor for hard gainers, as well as just average guys in general doing this. So, no, I don't think there is non-responders, unless their hormones are like absolutely destroyed and it takes them 2 months to heal from a paper cut, which again would be extreme exception. So, whatever you're doing, I recommend sharing it so other people that understand this can pick at it as well. Alright, so Doc Hank asks, clamping versus pumping debate. Clampers say pumping doesn't result in any kind of permanent gains. Can you give your opinion on the two? There are also different variances of clamping. Can you explain which ones you prefer most and which ones you find to be most ineffective? Is there any merit to combining clamping and pumping into the same routine? And you're welcome, Hank. So first, me and Hank talked about this a bit off the Reddit, and I think I've kind of gotten to see the light of it. Anyway, The issue with notable clampers or clamper advocates, I think, never really understood the best results for pumping, and then since it didn't work for them, they are adamant that it doesn't work for anyone, just because they're more experience-based than database. But that's besides the point. They both work very well. Pumping's safer for beginners. Clamping has a better angiogenic response and therefore is probably better at filling out tissue, but you're missing out on that tissue degradation that you would get with pumping and the overexpansion. I would say that they are both equally effective, but not for every person. So, let's say you have a strong angiogenic response, but not necessarily a great wound healing response through platelet-derived growth factor, then clamping would not actually be, or clamping would be very good for you compared to pumping, since it's a different kind of stimulant. And I probably sound like I'm talking out my ass here, which I understand, because it's all hearsay, conjecture. But second, if you have a very strong swell response with pumping, and all you do is get a whole bunch of skin edema and not necessarily tissue inflammation that we want, it's not going to work as well for you. And that this is just because you're limiting the amount of expansion you are generating. So that's two ways pumping can fail compared to clamping. However, if, again, the opposite, if your angiogenic response is somewhat weak, or you don't have a limiting swell response, then the pumping's better for you, just because you're actually working that tissue and stretching out farther than it possibly could on its own using the body's internal pressure. So, in my opinion, advanced guys need to do both to optimize their results. So, if you do, let's say it should be 50-50, right? If we are saying, okay, we want to stretch the tissue as much as possible, but we also want to get as much of an angiogenic effect as possible, we need to do 2 sets of 10 of pumping, 2 sets of 10 of clamping, and then that's going to give the best of both worlds effect. Now, you could probably split this up into separate days, so you can just have a clamping day and a pumping day, but I prefer to get the tissues as inflamed as possible with pumping, and then clamp it down and cause that hypoxic effect on this already stressed tissue to really exaggerate that swell response. And this is what I've basically done for the past, I don't know, year and a half, and that's when I've made the most of my girth gains, was with this technique. Probably, well, this is before the P shot, but 3/4 of an inch in 9 months of training girth. So that's pretty good if you look on forums and stuff like that. Again, I take peptides and stuff like that will increase rate of gain, but again, there's evidence to support that synergizing these, or having these two modalities synergize, is best for results. And finally, you were asking about the variants of clamping. And we had this conversation about this off Reddit. Basically, I don't think hard clamps, so the normal cable clamp, is optimal for 60% of guys, just because of its shape. It does, like, I might have one, give me a second. So, clamp, right? Whose penis is shaped like that? Okay? Sure, it's like a good shape here, but when it comes to this, not many guys are going to get effect like that. Like, if you have a boxy base like mine, you are never going to get the dorsal vein, the vein out of the penis, to fully occlude, or occlude at all. Because, like, look, there's like a nice little groove right there for it. And then, unless your penis like literally fits this to a T, you're going to have issues. It's probably better for wide penises than round penises. Then, I don't have a bunch of cock rings laying around right now, but, and then you can do a single ring, right? This is about the die. and that's going to have a pretty good effect if it's tight enough. And then finally, the best option, I believe, is multi-ring soft clamping. Now, when we say soft clamping, that's just the opposite of using a hard plastic. A hard plastic doesn't have any stretch. So if you Kegel, it is much less forgiving on your pelvic floor. Now, if you spread out the occlusion with, let's say, 4 tiny rings, if you watch my clamping video, you know what I'm talking about, you're going to have a much more even spread of the occlusion, meaning you're putting less pressure on potential nerves and the vein. Therefore, less pressure is needed to cause the occlusion to expand when you Kegel, making it almost foolproof. And then you also will get much better expansion, because since these are soft, it will go around whatever shape of penis you have, unless you are not as well endowed for that ring. And again, since these come in all different kinds of sizes, you can probably find whatever fits best for you. I think I'm rambling at this point. But basically, I think hard clamping's dumb. I think it should have died 10 years ago. And I think we should be solely using some kind of soft, rubbery tissue. Not rubber bands, not hair ties, but something designed for high pressures that doesn't twist and bend like a rubber band would. So, hope I went into enough detail for you, Hank. Thoughts on all-day cock rings. Alright, so Green Guarantee 6979 asks for thoughts on all-day cock rings to complement girth routines. Not telling you to fully restrict yourself, but enough to engorge. I'm pretty sure I've been pushing this for a year now in the general routines, but yes, I think it is a relatively smart idea, because what we are basically doing is keeping that tunica albuginea stretched out for a little bit longer than it would after a session without a cock ring. So that's going to coax the body into forming in a fatter shape than it was previous. However, I don't think you need it to be all day. I think you only need it to be like an hour, if I'm going to be honest, because what's going to happen is this expansion is slowly going to like come back to normal, but any trapped liquids is just going to kind of get trapped under the skin and edema. So I don't see the point of going all day, but extended wear after a session is probably a good idea. Okay, Valuable Nebula 1086 just states premature ejaculation. Cover that. Okay, I'm going to do a whole video on this, but the gist is to control premature ejaculation, you got to understand the mental side of it as well as the physical side of it. The mental side is if you get too excited and worried about busting your nut, you're probably going to bust your nut. It's like foreseeing into the future, right? You're setting yourself up for failure. If you have a pelvic floor issue, which would be the physical side, then that muscle that's causes ejaculation is already tight. If it's already tight, it's not going to take much sensation for cause it to contract more, which will then trigger the orgasm response. So what you need to do is work on reverse Kegels, and that will relax your pelvic floor. On top of that, you want a pretty strong pelvic floor. Now, Doc Hank thinks most guys are walking around with a tight pelvic floor, therefore it does not need to be worked on. I disagree a bit. I think you need to have control over it. So you need to learn how to flex it, you need to learn how to relax it. And then if you have a strong pelvic floor, you can get so good at controlling it that you literally never orgasm or ejaculate, and you can ejaculate on command basically. So the old rule of thumb, 10 to 15 years ago, was if you can hold a Kegel for 10 seconds, you basically will have full control over your orgasm. Now, when I could hold a Kegel for 10 seconds, I did have full control. However, my wife hated that. She wasn't my wife at the time. My wife hated that, so I stopped training for stamina, and now our sex life's gotten a little bit better for her because she's not tired and ragged by the end of it. And we're having sex more often because of that. Anyway. But yeah, I'm making a whole series on becoming a better lover. I'm just very busy in a bunch of other projects. So, alright, finally, the inchworm that could wants me to do a follow-up on my P-shot procedure. So, let's start with the bad news. I still have scabs from these injections. Now, these scabs are less than 1% of a chance to happen. I had a allergic reaction to the lidocaine that they use to numb the area, which caused a bunch of edema to form, and then these puncture wounds basically became blood blisters when I began to pump. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but again, this is most likely because of the allergic reaction, and then that became a scab, and since I was consistently aggravating them for 2 to 3 weeks, I just have 2 scabs on my penis at this moment. I'm taking 2 weeks off from PE to let them heal, and then I'll get back to it. The good news is I am scary large with my wife. About 6.3 to 6.4. I was a 6.1 before all this, and this is after all that swelling went down from the initial injection and allergic reaction. So we're talking 1/4 inch in 3 weeks without PE for a week already. I think it's really interesting. I wish I didn't have a lidocaine reaction, but I really think there's a lot. It could benefit a lot of people. Now, I get this a lot. Everything I do seems to turn out right. This is the one time things did not turn out right, so I'll take that as my L for the year. But you gotta take the good or the bad. I put on 3% already in total volume. Girth has been up and down because it's hard to measure length right now, because I'm not reaching max EQ when I am measuring, because 1, I am in a severe caloric deficit of about 1,000 calories, and 2, it takes a lot more blood to fill the thing right now. So the only time I really hit max size is with my wife, and I don't want to sound gross, but I'm gonna end up sounding gross. She is at her point, so at her limit for the moment. Like, before she felt tight, now she feels like I might hurt her if I get any larger, so that's why I'm kind of taking a step back. If you see my pictures, you guys know I don't really need more size. So yeah, I'm gonna finish it out, this procedure, with standard about 20 to 30 minutes of pumping once my skin heals, and I'll go from there. Important to note, these scabs, which will probably turn into superficial scars if I'm being honest, again, bad luck, do not impact my performance at all. There's like no fibrosis on the tissue itself, it's just on the skin. So I'm not gonna have any like weird curves or dings in my penis, just slightly uglier than it already was. So I think that covers it. I might have let it slip that I'm probably going to have to take a break from PE after this is all said and done, but we'll see. I get mixed signals from my wife. When she's ovulating, she wants it as big as possible and as hard as possible, but when she's close to her period, she wants it more easygoing, so to speak, which I understand. Hormones are a crazy thing for both men and women, so again, I gotta play it by ear. She doesn't have an issue taking all of me. I'm just worried that we're going to get to a point where certain positions are going to become even more cumbersome. So I believe that was every question. I'm going to double check before I sign off. Yep, that's all of them. So hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little much more relaxed than I usually am. I'm trying to work on getting better in front of the camera. I know I shouldn't have shaved. I hope you learned something. peakmalephysique.com, penis larger than 8 if you want to support me there, or you can go to my Patreon and join the cause, r/getting bigger. This is BD signing off.